friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amelia and today we're going to be doing my quarterly review for the first 3 months of this year, and I know this is like a month and a half late, but these things happen. We're not gonna dwell on that. We're just gonna go ahead and get straight into it. So I initially thought for this video about listing all the books that I read so far this year, like doing a quick review of them, giving you my rating, and I might still do that maybe for like the halfway mark of the year, just kind of give like a recap of everything that I have read. However, while that tells you what I've read, I don't find that it really tells the whole picture of what the first quarter has been like for me in my reading. So I have devised an alternate plan. I have an agenda. So what am I going to do? I have 2 sections here for you. So in section 1, we're going to talk about the year so far, and I have 2 subsections for that. We are getting very technical here. A qualitative section, which I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of the vibes so far this year, and the quantitative section, which I think will be very interesting because we're going to be looking at my reading data not just for this year so far, but comparing it to the last 3 years. I am in my 4th year currently of tracking my pages per day, like reading data. So we've got some other data to compare to, which I think will be interesting. And then for section 2, that is going to be our plan for next quarter. So we're gonna go ahead and start with section 1A, which is our qualitative vibe-based data. So not really data. I mean, I guess anything could be data technically if you want to get into it, but I don't. So in order to talk about the highs of the year so far, I thought it would be appropriate to select my 5 favorite books of the year so far and share them with you. So number 1 is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and I just wrote Mistborn meaning the first book, but consider this to mean like the whole series. I didn't want it to separate it out and have it take up more than one slot in the top 5. And I forgot how nice these editions are. I love the floppy trade paperbacks. Ooh, that's some good stuff. This series I read in February, I think, and I binged the whole thing. It's only 3 books, but still, I don't know the last time I read all of a series, just like one after the other, nothing else in between, just pure binging. And honestly, I had so much fun with that. I think this was such a good series for that, so I highly recommend, if you've been wanting to do some binge reading, this trilogy is definitely a good one for it. None of the books are crazy long, and it was a really good time. It sort of starts out as a heist story, but becomes something else entirely. I gave the first book 5 stars. I think the second book was like 4.5 or something, and then for the finale it went back up to 5 stars. So that's Mistborn. And number 2 on my list was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is a non-fiction book talking about the life of Henrietta Lacks, who is the woman that the HeLa cells were taken from. And if you don't know about the HeLa cells, which I would not be surprised if you didn't, they are like the first immortal human cells that were able to be kept alive in culture. And this is the woman they were taken from. She was a Black woman in a time when, that things have changed radically. I mean, they have, but they haven't at the same time, you know? A time when they were very disenfranchised, I suppose. And so you can imagine kind of how that went down, but essentially her cells were taken, but her family didn't really know, and they had no idea for a long time that her cells lived on. And all this time, while scientists were making discoveries and companies were making money off of her cells, like reselling them, the family couldn't even afford to see a family doctor. And just the way that this was put together was really well done. It was very well crafted. You got the human element as well as a sort of more sciencey aspect, but it is, I would say, more focused on the human element of who she was and who her family were and how this affected them as well as the world at large. And I highly recommend it. All right, the 3rd book on my list is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot series, and it was just like such a good time. It's a very short book, maybe it's like a couple hundred pages, and we're following a murder bot who has hacked his programming and wants nothing more than to watch TV, but he gets stuck looking after humans. And it's a very sort of comical, comedic kind of vibe without being like, I don't know, without going too far, I guess, or like, I don't know. It's, for me, kind of, in my personal opinion, a very tasteful sort of sci-fi comedy, and you start to see Murderbot, you know, maybe become more attached to these humans than they think they are. Number 4 on my list is Soldiers and Kings. This is another nonfiction, this time investigating the lives of migrants who are coming up through Mexico, specifically from Honduras, and looking at the lives of the people who end up making that choice to try to get away from the violence back home, and all the violence and everything they encounter on the tracks as they either try to get into the US or end up staying and becoming guides for other people on the tracks. And it was it is kind of a heads-on approach. The author spent time living amongst these people, and so when he presents this information to you, it's very much like the story of these specific people that he spent time with, and it's very heartbreaking in places, very real and gritty in others, and it was just extremely well done, and I highly recommend that you check it out. All right, and then number 5 on the list, this one definitely kind of came out of left field. I was not expecting it, but it is the Traveling Cat Chronicles. This is just this short little book that my sister gave me. It's translated from Japanese, and it's about a cat, and this guy is trying to find someone to take his cat, but we don't really know why, and it's revealed at the end, but it was very heartfelt and really got to me in ways that I did not think that it would. It's very short, so it's hard to say much without giving it away, but if you're looking for something that is kind of heartfelt and sad in aspects, I definitely recommend it. I give it 5 stars. Okay, so to look at the kind of lows so far this year, I thought I would mention the 2 books that I have DNF'd and just briefly mention the book that I think is the worst that I've read so far this year. And I'm not saying it's like super bad or anything, I just looked at everything I read and this was the one that I enjoyed the least. So we'll start with the DNFs. So I had 2. One was like definitely a DNF and one was a soft DNF. So I'll start with that one first. The book I soft DNF'd, it's not really even a soft DNF, as it is just like I ran out of time. My library hold expired, and that was Come As You Are. I believe that's by Emily Nagoski, which is a book just about female sexuality and the empowerment of it. And I don't have any problem with the book. I just, like I said, just kind of didn't spend a lot of time listening in those 2 weeks or whatever. And then my library hold ran out. So I do think I want to come back to that, but I haven't put in another hold yet. So I'll get to it eventually. And then the book that was like a definite hard DNF was Illborn. This is one that I think I got a recommendation from somebody on YouTube that they liked it. And after I DNF'd it, I also looked at like the Goodreads reviews, and I was able to find people who agreed with me, but there were a disturbing amount of high ratings. Because the writing was just bad. It was badly written, and I don't have space in my life for more badly written books. I already have one series that I have already committed to reading that is not very well written, and I don't have patience for poorly written books, and yeah. I think I got like 70 pages in and I was like, this isn't good. And so I put it down. And then for the worst book of this year so far, this is actually a very popular and widely liked book, but it did not hit for me, and that is All About Love by Bell Hooks. This just, to me, I don't know, I think maybe partially I just wasn't in the mood to listen to it, but it never hooked me. I was never interested. I had a hard time paying attention to it, and she did do a lot of kind of God spirituality talk, which just totally lost me. It didn't really feel like she was presenting new ideas or information, and maybe if I came back to it at a time when I was more ready to be receptive, I would enjoy it more. but as it stands, I just didn't feel like it had anything to offer me. If it has something to offer you, that's totally fine. That's just kind of how life is. But yeah, unfortunately for me, it was not really a hit. Okay, so that covers all of our qualitative data. So let's go ahead and jump into the quantitative data. So we're going to be taking a look at some graphs, visualizations, whatever you want to call them, of the first 3 months of the year. And as I said, compared to the last 3 years. So let's get into it. All right, welcome to the data portion of this video. So the first thing we're looking at here is just everything that I have read so far this year. And go ahead and pause if you want to look more closely at everything. And that is going to stand for all of the graphics that we're looking at. I'm not going to go crazy in depth about every single little bit. I'm just going to be kind of highlighting what I think is interesting and or relevant. I'm pretty happy with my reading year so far. I've read a lot of good books and really got out of my fantasy only sort of zone. And if we move along, there's just a quick look at the distribution by month. So I read a lot of books in January as well as March. However, I did read a lot of shorter books this year, which you will see a little bit more clearly later. Next, we are just looking at the distribution by star rating. I was actually pretty surprised to see how many 5 stars I have so far this year, considering I have really cranked up how discerning I am with my ratings, like especially last year with my new 5Ps system. I do have a few not so highly rated, but mostly concentrated in the upper end of the scale, with nothing under 2.5 yet. There was one book that I would have probably rated under 2.5, but I DNF'd it because if it's under 2.5 stars, it's probably not worth my time at all. And it is worth noting that I do actually go down, like my regular ratings are down to the 0.25, but just for the sake of this visualization, I rounded them because I thought it would look too messy trying to differentiate between all those different categories. Next, we're looking at distribution by genre. Unsurprisingly, fantasy is the biggest section, but sci-fi is very close behind it, maybe a book or 2 off only. And then, of course, we have nonfiction and genfic and YA. I think both of those I just read 1 book for. Moving on to the reading format, we can see ebooks were dominating this year. I got a Kobo for Christmas, and as you can see, it has been much loved. It has its own stats like on the device, and I can see that I'm already over 100 reading hours on it. So that tells you I have definitely been enjoying it. Meanwhile, physical books and audiobooks have relatively equal slices, with physical maybe a little bit higher. But overall, it's very interesting just how much physical is lost out in this quarter. I still think that it is my favorite way to read a book, but ebooks are just very convenient because I can get library books without having to actually go to the library and pick them up. Speaking of library books, if we take a look at BookSource, we can see that the library has completely dominated my reading this year, which is in line with my ebook usage. But the library section also includes, I think, all of the audiobooks that I've listened to so far this year. And leaving the owned, I think I might have read 1 physical book from the library, but actually that might have been last year. So, yeah. Definitely use your library, kids. I would not be able to read as many books as I do if I had to buy them all. Okay, let's move on and look at this year's data compared to the last 3 years. So first, books read by year, specifically the first quarter. You can see the number of books has been steadily growing each year. And then this year we have a pretty significant jump, totally outstripping the sort of somewhat similar numbers from previous years. However, if we look at pages read, we see that it's pretty consistent with no big jumps. We also see a change in the pattern of the last 2 years where January drops from being the biggest reading month to the smallest. And I think I can attribute that to spending a week on vacation, where the only reading that I did was a bit in the airport. But if my books read have gone up and not my pages, what gives? Well, I did read a number of shorter books this year, as I said, like Murderbot and Piranesi. But a big contributor is that I listen to a lot more audiobooks, which if we look at the genres I read by year, we can see in the light green section, which represents nonfiction, that it has grown a lot. And for the most part, I listen to my nonfiction books on audio. I did read one physical this year, but for the rest of that section, it's all represented by audiobooks. So we can see that the whole growth in that section sort of represents some of the amount of books that have increased without an increase in pages, as I do not track pages for audiobooks. And then also we can see that my reading in general has diversified. It is my first year reading 5 genres in the first quarter since 2022. And 2022 was my first full year getting back into reading as an adult. So I was kind of reading around to see what I liked. And then, as you can see, I kind of really got into the fantasy. It has always been a big section, but even last year, you can see I really went ham into the fantasy. So it is interesting to see it diversifying again this year and having fantasy actually be the smallest portion that it's been so far. It still is the biggest portion, but it is the smallest portion that it has ever been. Moving on to source, we can now see the arrival of the ebook in stark contrast to earlier years, making up 50% of this year, whereas before, not a single percentage. Now, I didn't have an e-reader, but you can read ebooks on your phone. However, that just seemed not appealing to me at all. And then audio has also been steadily increasing its percentage, chewing away at my physical reads. If this trend continues, physical books are going to be an endangered species around here, but I think that it will probably stabilize and maybe we might actually see a bit of an increase in the physical books for the rest of the year. Maybe next year. I don't really know about next year yet. It's so far away. It's hard to say. And yet it's also not that far away. The year is kind of slipping by. But at the beginning of the year, I was still taking the bus to work, so I listened to a lot of audiobooks on the way there and back. Now that I'm driving, however, the amount of time that I have to listen has gone down a lot. Normally I just listen to music in my car, but even if I were to listen to audiobooks, it's just significantly less time to go back and forth, so we lose out on time there. All right, finally, we're just going to look quickly at pages read by day, starting with January. So we have this dip in the beginning, which for 2022 and 2023 makes sense. That would be like the first week of classes. But in 2024 and 2025, I didn't have classes. Now, as I said earlier, for 2025, I was on vacation and it would have been that week. So that's accounted for. But I don't know what in 2024 made me skip that week. It's just an interesting pattern. I'm not really sure why it exists. But the average pages that I read in January per day for 2025 was 62.67, and the average pages overall for all of the years per day is 76.47. Now, looking at February, it is much more consistent, although there's a little bit of tapering in days read towards the end. Not like pages per day, but like the number of days. You can see it's a little bit more sparse. And overall for 2025, my average pages per day was 104.86, and the average overall was 79.1. 2025 is actually my most read year for February by overall page count at 2,936, beating 2023, which was the runner-up, by 464 pages. All right, finally, March. We are getting to the end. March is also very consistent. Maybe a slight taper in the days read towards the end, but less so than February, looking pretty consistent there. And we are also consistent in page count for me over February at 2,916 pages, which is only 20 less than February, and that's for this year. However, with 3 extra days, the average is lower at 94.1 pages per day, with an overall average for all 4 years of 76.45, making February the month with the highest average. But that is all that I have for the data section, so let's go ahead and get back into the rest of the video. Okay, friends, we are on the final stretch now. We're getting into section 2, which is the plan for next quarter, which I'm kind of already a third of the way through at the point of filming this. So, you know, the plan and retroactively, if that makes sense. I don't think it does, but whatever. Okay, so the first part of my plan, I have 3 parts. Part 1 is complete as many series that I am currently ongoing reading That was a bad sentence. But anyway, to just kind of clear out the list a bit, clear out the mental space that I am holding for those series, to make room for, specifically, I want to actually get into Malazan. I keep saying it and I keep not doing it, and I think it would help me if I would just spend this quarter, or at least part of it, trying to clear some series off the list so that I have it in me to take on a big series like this, and hopefully can kind of not read them one after the other, but get quite a few in without feeling like I'm missing out on other series because I've already finished them. So I don't want to do it just because of starting Malazan, but just in general. I don't actually know what the number is right now. I meant to count, I forgot, but it is kind of high, I think. I'll try to put it up here. So yeah, that is the first part of my plan. Part 2 is I want to finish all of my purchased Audible books. We don't have the subscription anymore, but we used to, where you'd get like one book every month. And I want to finish all of those before Amazon decides to take away the license to them. Especially with everything going down with Kindle, I don't trust them. And I want to at least have listened to everything once so that I can sort of feel like we got our money's worth, even if it gets taken away from us, which would suck. And then part C, part 3, whatever you want to call it, is just vibe. Have a good time, read books that I'm excited to read, and at the pace that I feel like reading them. As of today, I just finished a challenge that will probably be the next video after this one, and it had to do with kind of reading pace, and now that it's over, I'm just excited to do whatever I want without thinking about it. And honestly, I'm in the mood to just like devour a bunch of stories. I don't want to take my time, I just want to read a lot. That's the mood. And I had like 3 library holds come in, I think 2 today and 2 yesterday, so 4, but I deferred 1. But I still have 3 that I accepted, so I need to get through those in the next 2 weeks at least. So yeah, that's the vibe. Have fun, or die trying. Hopefully not the latter. But that concludes my quarterly review. I hope you have enjoyed this video. It's a new kind of format that I came up with, so for sure let me know in the comments if you liked it and if I should continue doing it, especially the data section. I find that stuff so interesting, but it is a lot of work to put together the visualizations, so I want to know if you guys want to see it before I keep doing it. And we're also into the 3rd year of this channel. We had our 2nd birthday in March, and I think it would be kind of fun to try to hit 500 subscribers before our 3rd birthday. So consider subscribing if you liked this video, but that's all I have for today. So I'll see you next time.